Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Priyal. I'll be the host for you. I'm very excited to introduce this special guest who's got over 3 decades of experience in the digital space, has worked in different domains like program management, digital business, and who's even advising the senior level executives for corporate professionals across multiple industries like textile, trading, real estate. You name it, and you have the industry this gentleman can talk to you about. His name is Mr. Heminder Ahluwalia, and he's going to take us through with this entire journey of what it takes for someone who's at the senior level executive to become a CEO, whether he or she is a CIO and how he or she can become a CEO. That's the journey we're going to discover through this webinar right now, which is going to be conducted by our host, Mr. Heminder Ahluwalia. Mr. Ahluwalia, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Priyal, for the fantastic introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be in front of you virtually, and thank you for taking the time out on this Monday afternoon. I know Monday is a busy day immediately after the weekend, and I really appreciate that you've come to listen to this session. I want to make it even more interesting by making it a bit interactive. So what I will do is I'll probably start off with maybe 1 or 2 questions from the listeners, and then I'll go through my deck and then leave time at the end for some more questions. And I don't have too many slides, so I'm not going to bore you with too much of death by presentation. But I do want to mention some key points and some important things that matter to any CIO or CDO. Even though the presentation says paving the way from CIO, CDO to CEO, even if you're not in a CIO, CDO position, and if you're in some sort of a leadership position in the area of IT, then this presentation would be relevant to you. By CDO, I mean Chief Digital Officer primarily, but it could also mean Chief Data Officer. So if you're a Chief Data Officer, then this is also good for you, right? And by way of, so he already gave the introduction of myself, but just wanted to mention that I, with over 30 years of experience, I've worked in various industries, come across, lots and lots of CIOs. My longest stint was in Gartner, where I worked for about 12 years, and that gave me a lot of exposure to CXOs and CIOs and their way of thinking and the kinds of challenges and issues that they have in their careers. Right now, at the moment, I'm more like a independent consultant, but I do work with some startups. I work with IDC on a part-time basis. I also have my own outfit, which is the logo you see over there, Minervian Consulting. And my forte is primarily digital transformation and everything connected with digital transformation, whether it is processes, technology, or people, right? So with that, let's get started. This presentation is essentially going to lay out some key aspects of how you can plan your careers, what you could be looking at. If you're looking at an elevated position, if you have aspirations to become a CEO of your organization or of some other organization outside, then I hope some tips from this session would be useful to you, right? So I also want to put a disclaimer that all the information that I presented here is based on my own experience. It's also based on information that I've curated, which is in the public domain, right? So, and of course, there are references and sources to that. So with that, let's get started. I want to ask a question from the listener. Anyone would volunteer? Just or anybody has a question for me, rather, before we get started. Let's put it that way. Does anybody have a question?
Yeah, if you have any questions, you can drop it in chat box, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, Priyal, then what I'll do is I'll request you to, because since I'll be going through this presentation, if some questions come up, do let me know. I do want to address them towards the end so that we finish on time. But if you see, I'll go by your cue as to how you guide me on this.
Sure.
Okay. So I think at the moment there are no questions. So let's get started. I always start with an interesting graphic, and which is, let's see, go here, which is, all right. So you want to be a CEO, right? What is a CEO, and what does a CEO look like, right? So this is an interesting graphic that I came across. Top performing CEOs, what do they look like, right? So they are predominantly male at the moment, right, with only 2% female CEOs. 37% wear glasses, 63% don't wear any glasses. And of course, you can see from the receding hairline as to how many are bald and how many are not, kind of children they have, and what's their marital status, right? This is on a lighter note, but coming down to the thick of things and into this presentation, since we're going to be talking about CEOs and CIOs and CDOs, let's start with the CEO first, right? As you can see on this graphic on the right-hand side, this is a Gartner extract which talks about what are CEOs today, especially for 2022, 2023, what are they basically focused on, right? What is their main key KRA, or rather, key focus area for them? And as you can see over here, growth is the number one, right? And obviously so for any CEO of whether it's a private sector or public sector, is the growth is always the number one parameter, right, to gauge success of any CEO. But this time it's a bit interesting because you also have tech related, which is the second highest focus area, and that's because technology is playing a very key role, for that matter, for any company, right? Every company is a technology company, and now every company is becoming a digital company. So technology resides very high on the CEO's agenda, followed by workforce, which is again post-COVID. It's all about how you empower your workforce and how you make it interesting for them. Whether it is hybrid work, whether it is on-site, or whether it is work from home, work from anywhere, it's on the CEO's mind, right? Followed by corporate, financial, and the usual things that any CEO has on their plate, is mentioned over here. I thought I'll start off with these graphics just to set the context and make the presentation interesting, right? Okay, so what are we going to cover today? We're going to talk about obviously the CEO role, where we'll set set some more context. We'll decode the CEO role, what does the CEO do basically, right? We'll talk about the CIO CDO role today, and in fact, the very fact that you're in that position today is a good thing. It's advantageous to be in that role, and I'll tell you why. We'll also talk about the path to CEO position, right? How can you reach that position, and what kind of a situation, if you're in, it makes it easier or harder for you to reach your final goal. We'll talk about a transition plan, which is something that you can use and plan for yourself and think ahead that, in the next number of years, I want this kind of a position, a CEO position, and what do I need to do to get to that level, right? And of course, we'll talk about some examples. In fact, there are plenty of examples, but I picked a few, which because they're from larger organizations across the world. And then we'll leave some time for questions, right? So that basically is the plan. And let's go forward. So setting the context, right? Now, the context is this, that any organization for that matter, right? Irrespective of the industry, you usually, you have a CEO, right, who's at the head of the company, and you have other C-level people, right? So you'll have, typically the business roles, which are the chief operating officers, chief financial officer, chief marketing officer. There could be many other chief XXX related to business, right? And then you have the technology roles, which are the CIOs, the CDOs, the CTOs, CISOs, and there could be many others, right? Now, we are going to be focusing primarily on the CIO and the CDO. But then again, like I said in the beginning, that I mean, even if you're not a CIO, CDO, if you're something else, then also this session would be useful to you. Now, why I'm showing this graphic is basically to show the path, right? Now, how do you elevate to a CEO position? You basically have three ways to go about it. There is one path which is within your organization where you are currently at handling a CIO role or a CDO role or whatever in the technology capacity, and you do a lateral shift. Right now, it's not easy. Not everybody can shift from a CIO to a CMO or a CHRO, but that is one avenue, and one needs to work on it. Right, one needs to get the right kinds of skills. And we usually see CIOs, becoming chief operating officers, and then from there it becomes easier to become a CEO. Now, it's obvious that the business roles will have a greater advantage to reach the CEO level than a technology role like a CEO or a CDO. Again, it depends on many other factors, but so that's one route. The other route is where the route number two is where you actually go outside, right? There are a lot of CIOs, C-level people in the technology capacity, which they are not able to move within their organization. They're constrained, they're restricted. It's difficult, right? Because you have the business roles waiting to get that top slot. So what they do is they will leave their organization and go outside. Now, outside means it could be that you become a founder of a startup, or you become a venture capitalist, or you become an investor, or you pick up some other C-level role, maybe a CIO role or some other C-level role outside. And then from there, you have a path to becoming the CEO, right? So essentially there are three ways. And what I'd like you to do is, as you're going through the presentation, just think deep within yourself, right? Do a real-time introspection as I'm taking you through, because just sit back and think about all the things that I'm saying, and because you might be thinking at this point in time that I mean I've been many years in my current company, and I don't think I'm able to go up to that level. Maybe I should go outside and maybe choose that route, right? Now, route number three is obviously is CIOs becoming CEOs, and we'll see in what kind of situations that happens, right? Now, all of this matters a great deal matters on three things, right? Which is what you do, where you work, and who you are, right? Because all of these will shape your future career, right? So by what you do is, in whatever capacity you are right now in, what is the level or the amount of business impact you're creating for the organization, right? Because if you have aspirations to get to the top slot, you have to create business impact, right? Somebody has to notice the great work that you're doing for the organization. So business impact could be in the form of growth, it could be sales, it could be cost savings, it could be de-risking, right? Some significant impact has to be shown, right, in order to be noticed. The second important thing is relationships, because at the CEO level, relationships matter a great deal, right? And if you're a CIO or a CDO at the moment, you should be working on your relationships, and relationships is within your organization, with the C-level, with your peers. It could also be outside with your partners, vendors, key customers, which in any case you would be doing. But here the focus is more on the relationships with the C-level, right? Because you want to be seen as a person that is yielding influence, person that has connections, because all that matters when you reach to the top. The third most important thing under what you do is being a change agent, right? So what kind of change are you bringing in the organization that you're in right now? Just think about it, right? How are you driving culture? How are you driving transformation? If you're involved in transformational kind of projects, how you're creating that change, right? So business impact, relationships, and change management, being a change agent are the three, very important pillars. So that is under what you do. Now, where you work also matters, right? Because the size of the organization, are you working in a very large organization, mid-size or a small or a startup? Because the route to the top depends on the size of the organization as well, right? If you're in a big organization, then obviously it's going to take time, and there are a lot of other people waiting in line to get the CEO spot, right? And you have to work double or triply as hard to create that impact, build relationships, and being a change agent. So size of the organization matters. The type of organization also matters, right? Now, type is whether you're in a public sector, that has different set of dynamics. If you're in a private sector, it works differently. Are you in a multinational? Are you in an Indian MNC? Because culture comes in. Are you in a promoter-driven organization? Because there, it's the promoter that makes all those calls. And frankly, promoter-driven organizations, it's a lot harder to get to the top slot, right? So where you work matters a lot. And lastly, who you are, right? And that's basically yourself, your profile. What kind of experience do you carry, right? How experienced are you in your role? Do you have cross-functional experience, or are you only experienced in IT and the great job that you're doing in IT, is that it? Or you also carry some other experience like marketing or maybe operations or something of that sort, because if you have that kind of experience, then that makes it easier for you to get the next job, right? Which is the CEO's job that you want. What kind of a CIO, CDO are you right now, right? Now, again, the type means, it has to do with the organization size as well, but type is more of, are you more of an outgoing kind of a person? Are you more of a geek kind of a CIO? So, it matters, right? That has a certain bearing on your movement. If you're too techie, then that might make things difficult for you. What kind of skills you carry, right? So now CIOs who are always on the move and who are always thinking of the next level and wanting to reach the top, they're constantly enhancing their skills, right? It's never a static situation. You're always building, your career with additional skills, and in today's world, digital skills and technologies and even soft skills, right? So all these matter a great deal. What kind of a personality are you, right? Are you a very outgoing, a very extrovert kind of a person? Are you an introvert? Are you the kind of CIO that involves the larger team, or are you the one that works with very small focused teams, right? So personality, matters quite a bit. And then finally, fortunately or unfortunately, in this part of the world, pedigree matters quite a bit. What kind of an education background you have? Obviously, if you're from premier institutes, you have an engineering and you have an MBA, and you carry some sort of a relevant experience, then your path to a CEO position would be a lot quicker, right? So all these three areas, these three buckets matter, will decide how you will progress to the next level, right? So it's important to know that. All right, let's move on to the next one. Now let's decode the CEO role, right? What does a CEO do, right? Now, apart from the basics that we all know, I think it's important to, because if you have aspirations to become a CEO, you need to keep these in mind, right? It's a very, I would say it's a very stressful role, and because you are the face of the company, the buck stops at you. You have to face all the consequences for whatever decisions you make. But other than that, the role, right? The role is drive profitability and share price for stakeholders, right? So this, in a typical private sector organization, this would be the key parameter. You are in that role because you have to drive growth and return to the to your stakeholders, shareholders, share price and all of that. You also oversee and provide strategic direction for an organization, right? So because you're the leader, whatever you say and whatever direction you decide for the organization is what is supposed to happen. So that's the second important part of the role. The third is implement change and drive transformation, right? So successful CEOs are always, they are excellent change agents because, things flow from the top. And they are ultimately responsible for transformational projects. So that's a key area for them, a key result area for them. Engage with employees, customers, partners, public relations, media. So this is all about engagement, right? A CEO spends a great amount of time connecting with employees, connecting with the ecosystem, public relations, media, and all of that, right? So that's another important area. The next is manage overall operations and resources for a company. So this is, the entire operations, right from, so it's finance, marketing, HR, sales, product development, R&D, and all of that, right? So that's another important area. The role also requires CEOs to make major corporate decisions. Right? So your decision making has to be pretty sharp, right? Whether how is that growth going to come? Whether it's going to come organically, inorganically, what sort of M&A opportunities you're looking at, what new markets you should be exploring, and so forth, right? So all that depends on the kinds of decisions that get made, and being a CEO, you are ultimately responsible for that, right? And last but not least is be the liaison between company operations and board of directors, right? The board of directors appoint the CEO in most cases. So they are the connect between the organization, the operations, and the board of directors, right? Do we have a question, Priyal?
Yes, we have a question by Ram. And the question says there has been two key instances where in the last 12 months, where the great resignation followed by the great recession or layoffs. So as a CEO or CXO, how would one proactively handle this situation? And there's follow-up question to that, but let you answer the first one first.
Well, yeah, that is any CEO's nightmare, right? The great resignation and what was the other one? The great resignation and?
The layoffs, which we see in the technical, the tech space at the moment. So how does a CEO handle such situations which sort of
it is yes, it's the hardest thing that the CEO has to execute, right? Which is layoffs. So unfortunately, that's part of the business. If business is down, you have too many resources at hand and not enough work, then layoffs is something that has to happen, right? Unfortunately, that's the reality. How they handle it, I mean, they have to play a very balancing act, right? They can't be getting too emotional with the layoffs, so they have to keep a balance that yes, for the business. So the CEO's mind is supposedly very, very focused, right? If layoffs need to happen, then unfortunately they do happen, right? They don't think twice, and that's because they've been installed in that place to drive profitability, right? So and at the same time, they can't be getting too emotional that because otherwise it'll become very difficult to manage the business. So the short answer to this is that that is the unfortunate reality, and it's probably the hardest thing that the CEO has to do is to let go of his or her own people. But in good times, they also hire a lot, right? So that's the other one. And the great resignation, I mean, that is I would say it's a new reality for the CEOs right now, because post-COVID, we are seeing a lot of resignations, so to say, because because of the kind of work environments that employees are wanting to choose. Again, that's part of de-risking, right? So if your key people are leaving, you need to de-risk, and you need to, work with your one downs. The CEO has to work with the one downs to make sure that that there is enough buffer, in the sense that if people are leaving, then people are multi-skilled, or they've been reskilled in a way that they can handle roles that are otherwise going out, right? So that's I hope that answers the question, or at least addresses part of it.
Sure. So there was a follow-up question by Ram. There was a follow-up question by Ram, Mr. Ahluwalia, and the question was, in the event of the great resignation and the layoffs, if someone's a CXO of a startup, how would they react or take advantage of the situation where you have these big companies laying off people, or people resigning from these big companies? So how does a CEO of a startup take advantage of the situation? And in follow-up to that, what's the best strategy they could have to balance between the investor's interest and the company's growth and the resources to be channelized well?
Okay, that's a very long question. Let me take that question towards the end of the presentation, if I can. If I may, right?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, just park that for right now. Okay. So we talked about the role. Let's talk about the skills, right? What kind of skills do CIOs have? And some of it may be obvious, but I think it's worth mentioning, because if you're exploring this kind of a role, you have to look at all these areas, right? These are the skills that you need to bring on board, starting with communication, right? So you need to be very articulate. You need to be very clear in how you are interacting with people, your stakeholders, your employees, your customers, and communication is also part of culture, right? Because if you are advocating, good communication, then it has to be throughout the organization, right? And it starts from you as a CEO. So a CEO needs to communicate really well to their employees and to the ecosystem. So communication is important. Collaboration is another one, right? Now it's all about teamwork at various levels, right? And the CEO has to drive that culture of collaboration, of people working together in teams, sharing and striving for that common goal, or that KRA. Flexibility is another important skill for a CEO, which is situations can change very quickly, right, for the organization. So how flexible is the CEO in terms of looking at different models, different aspects of work, and breaking down that work so that you're able to adapt to new constantly changing situations. Transparency, right? It's a very important skill, because you want to be looked up as somebody who's very transparent, and there's nothing being hidden, right, from employees. And employees are very quick to find out if something is not being shared. Now, obviously, everything can't be shared, but things which can be, should be, is part of that transparency skill, right? How transparent are you to your employees and to your stakeholders? Ethics goes without saying. You want to be the most ethical. You want to drive that culture of being ethical and practicing ethics to the highest standards. Assertiveness is a very key skill for any CEO. Imagine a CEO who's not assertive, right? What will that situation look like? It'll be a situation where the CEO is overpowered by their one downs. So you need to be assertive. You need to own up and be accountable for whatever decisions you make, right? Another important skill is forward thinking. You need to be ahead of the game as much as you can. So successful CEOs today are not only they're handling their business really well, but they're also thinking ahead, right? Thinking ahead in terms of possible disruptions to their business, possible opportunities. So that's another important skill. Adaptive is, again, related to flexibility in a way that situations change. For example, COVID was a lightning from nowhere. a lightning strike, and successful organizations that had this adaptive culture were able to survive and come out of it, right? So that's that. And consistency, right? You want to be seen as somebody who's consistent and not changing every now and then. So those are important skills for any CEO. However, modern CEOs, right? CEOs in today's times also need to be tech savvy, right? They need to be data driven. Emotional intelligence continues to be very high because of the fact that you've got great resignation, you've got the whole people dynamics is becoming more relevant in today's times, and a CEO needs to emote in that fashion, and of course an agile mindset, right? It's all about time to market, speed. So the more agile you are, the faster things will happen in your organizations, right? So that mindset has to start from you, and then from there it goes downwards. From a qualification point of view, most CEOs have some sort of an advanced degree. They usually have executive MBAs. They also get some sort of a board level experience. So if you go on LinkedIn and look at CEO profiles, you'll typically find that they're also board members in other organizations, right? And of course, soft skills exposure is highly critical over here, right? Now, why I'm showing out all this to you is because you have aspirations to become a CEO, and this is the package that you have to sign up to, right? Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. Now, being a CIO and CDO today is really advantageous. In fact, these are the best of times. If you're in that role, these are the best of times for you. And why? Because of significance, right? Now, digital acceleration has put the limelight on the CIO and CDO, right? The role has become very important and critical. And post-COVID, many organizations are digitally accelerating, right? Their set of initiatives, and the CIO and CDO plays a critical role in that. Also, the CEO and line of business heads had expectations from IT have also gone up, right? So that's the other thing. I mean, they expect a lot from you now, right? So because they know that you can do it, so the expectations have also gone up accordingly. Continuous innovation is the need of the hour for leading organizations, right? We are no longer in that situation where things can be static for very long, especially if you're in an organization that's customer facing, or like banking and financial services, retail. Continuous innovation is the need of the hour. That is an expectation that that CEOs will have, right? Pervasiveness. Again, these are good times in the sense that there's plenty to choose from the IT landscape, right? There is, the whole concept of open innovation, startup ecosystems, API economy. They all act as catalysts, right? So you have the supply side is quite abundant. You have a lot to choose from. Being a CIO and CDO, I mean, that's where you put your mind and say that, okay, there's an ocean out there, and how do we select the best for our company, right? Huge opportunities in organizations requiring legacy modernization. This is the best time to be in this role today, because of acceleration, a lot of legacy companies are in the process of digitalizing. So the opportunity is huge. The impact that you're creating or you create as a CIO or CDO role today is quite significant, right? So business impact through digitalization, you have the opportunity to yield influence and strategic decision making with the C-level, building future-ready organizations through technology implementation. So these are the impacts that you can create, and probably you are creating in some shape or form. And also change agent to drive tech adoption. So we see that a lot of successful CIOs and CDOs becoming change agents to drive tech adoption. And we're also seeing organizations where technology has been implemented, but unfortunately the tech adoption has taken a back seat, right? And as a result, things start falling apart. So successful CIOs and CDOs look into this area really well and make sure that the adoption part happens. From a role perspective, yeah, the CEO. I mean, again, think about your role right now, what you do, and you have a unique view into the organization's key processes and functions, right? As a CDO, responsible for digitalizing the business, you are automatically coming into contact with all the processes and technologies that are out there, and so you understand the business basically. That's what I'm trying to say. You also understand the pulse of the market, the pulse of the customer. You're driving strategic and thought leadership for the organization. So these are the things that you're probably doing, and this puts you in excellent shape. And if you're doing it really well, to create that impression and to create your credentials for the next role, right? Which could be a CEO role for you. Okay. Now here is I took some graphic representations from a 2021 Spencer Stewart report, right? That came out, and that had profiled about 169 CIOs across industries. And again, why I'm showing you this is just to give you a perspective of what the Indian CIO profile looks like, and that'll be the base for going forward, right, for the next role, which could be a CEO role if that's what the desire is. So what this report says is that across industries, this is the age profile of the average age of CIOs, and rather the age of CIOs across industries. So the average age is around 46 years. And you can see, consumer, finance, healthcare, it differs, right? It's not one size fits all. So that's on the age side. Cross-industry exposure. Today's successful CIOs they've worked in, at least 63% have worked in 2 or more industries, which is a good thing, because the more experience, the cross-functional experience, cross-industry experience you have, the better are your chances for elevating to the next role. The third is international experience. In my mind, that's important. I feel that getting some sort of an international experience is a key to your success. However, we see that among the Indian CIOs, only 13% probably have international experience. Most of them are homegrown, which is fine. It's just that it makes it a little bit more harder to get to the next coveted spot, right? Because typically CEOs look for people who've got multi-exposure, right? And international experience matters quite a bit. The average tenure for a CIO in India, as per this report, is around 8.4 years, which is a bit on the high side. And if you compare this with EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, it's about 3.7 years. Again, the advice here is, at least my advice would be that don't stick too long as a CIO in your role. Maybe 5 years is a good number. Then I think you should look at, if you have that aspiration to move up the ladder, then I think 5 years is a good time to be in one role, right? All right, now we get to the path to the CEO position, right? So in what situations it's easier to get to the role, and in what situations it becomes difficult, right? So I think this is important to know. So I call these catalysts. So if you're working in a heavy tech company, and where technology is at the center of the business, and these are companies like IT consulting, your online online companies or online retail, online education, online healthcare, software development, right? Software product development, social media, semiconductor. In these kinds of companies, if you're working in these kind of companies, it's a bit easier to get to the CEO position, and that's because and we are seeing that CIOs are becoming CEOs, right? So CIOs turning to CEO is preferred because the target market is the target customers are CIOs, right? So so that it's a lot easier to be working in a technology company and getting the top slot as compared to working in an end user organization and not being from the business, right? Then another lot is technology spin-offs, right? So typically, banking and financial services companies usually spin off their IT, right, into separate outfits, and that's another opportunity. That's a chance that as a CIO you have to lead that outfit, to become the CEO of that outfit. It could be other organizations that are setting up global shared centers, delivery centers. So their CIOs have a good opportunity to become CEOs. The third category is if you're a turnaround CIO, right? Now, usually in mid-sized companies, CIOs who have successfully transformed businesses, they have a good chance to become CEOs, right? And that's also because in that process, they have developed a brand. Which is another important thing, is developing your personal brand, right? So they develop a brand equity, which actually augments their entire set of capabilities, and of course also an advanced degree matters, right? So an advanced degree like an MBA and other kind of certifications, if they have that, and if they're a turnaround CIO, then that makes it a lot easier to get the next slot, right? The next position. However, there are challenges. Now, CIO not reporting to CEO, that's if you're in a situation where you're not reporting to the CEO, in fact, you're reporting to the COO or CFO with no direct line to the CEO, then that's a challenge for you, right? You're unlikely to advance your career to the CEO position. And also because of limited visibility and with CEO and board, it'll become difficult, right? So in that case, my advice would be that if you're in this situation, you should either consider, changing your reporting, or maybe look outside where you are in a position where you're reporting to the CEO, right? The second area, the challenge area, is IT is not central to the business. Right now, here, this is a situation where IT is viewed as a support center. It's going to become very difficult for the CIO or CDO in that organization to aim for the top job, right? Because here you'll have other people waiting in queue, and those would be the business people, right? So the chief marketing officer, the chief financial officer, or chief operations officer, they'll have preference because they are directly making an impact to the business, right? See, at the end of the day, excuse me, it all comes down to impact, right? If IT is not central to the business, you're probably not creating that impact. Not creating that business impact. I'm sure you're doing an excellent job as a support center, but the business impact is not being created, which means the CEO is probably not going to appreciate, giving that role to a CIO. So it'll probably go to a business person. Being too technical. Now, if a CIO is viewed as a techie or a geek, right, he or she will get all the respect from in the company as a problem solver, as a go-to person, but unlikely to become a CEO, right? They'll probably be stuck in that role for quite some time. So these are some of the challenges. There are other factors as well, which is exposure and leadership. Many technology leaders, they lack the P&L experience and exposure to revenue generating functions. So it is essential, if you're thinking of moving up the ladder, you need to get PLN experience and also revenue generating functions, exposure to that. Insufficient leadership experience is another factor which probably will not allow you to move up, right? So which means you need to get as much experience as you can, which is in the previous slide I had shown a graphic where CIOs had worked in multiple industries, so it's good to get cross-industry experience. Get as much leadership experience as you can get. Lack of forging relationships at the C level, right? So if you're not, spending enough time with your peers at the C level, then that's a problem, right? Now, it could also be that you're perfectly happy and content with what you're doing. I know so many CIOs who love being a CIO and they don't want to be a CEO, right? So that's also fine. It all depends on what is a priority for you. But if you're looking at getting the top job, then you need to spend a good amount of time with the C level, right? You need to be visible and noticed. All right, so now we come down to a transition plan, right? So having understood the CEO role, having understood, being in that CIO, CDO role today and doing a fantastic job that you're doing currently, and also understanding what's required to become a CEO, you need to make a plan for yourself, right? And I believe in simplicity, so it's not a very complicated plan. It's just a 4-step plan. The very first thing you need to do is, I call this the understand phase, right? Which is you need to sit down and think, right? And really ask some questions to yourself that why do I want to become a CEO, right? What is the motivating factor? What do I see in the role, right? What rewards will it bring to me? What timeline am I looking at? Am I looking at getting that top job in 10 years from now, and 15 years from now, and 5 years from now? And how ready am I, right? It could be that that you find out through these set of questions that you need to work a lot on your personal career. You need to plan it out. So that's it'll be a reference point that, okay, today I'm sitting down with myself and answering these questions, and this will help me understand what I need to do in the future to get that top job, right? So the first phase is the understand phase. The second is an introspect, which is again it's a SWOT, right? You're looking at what are your strengths right now, what are you good at, what is it that you're doing really well, what are your weaknesses, areas of improvement, what are the opportunities that you have right now, right? It could be an opportunity to upskill. It could be an opportunity for a new role. What are the threats? That, if you don't do anything and you aspire to be at that top job, but you're not doing anything, you just wait it out, and that could be a threat for you, right? So you need to figure that out. So basically, a SWOT. Doing a SWOT analysis on yourself will make you understand that, okay, so this is who I am, this is what I want to be, and this is my present state right now, right? So now I need to plan. So then comes the prepare phase. Okay, so this is where you've understood the where you want to go. You've done an introspection from a skills and experience perspective. Now you need to prepare, right? So what new skills I need to learn, right? What relationships I need to build, right? As I mentioned earlier, relationships matter a great deal. So you have to constantly be looking out and forging those relationships at the C level, relationships with decision makers, stakeholders. If you have access to board members, then make those great relationships with board members. How do I strengthen my personal brand? Now, personal brand is important because otherwise, how are people going to see who you are and what is that aura that you create within the organization for yourself? Do I stay here or look outside? you might wonder that, yeah, I mean, in this organization, I probably don't have much of a chance because, there are business people who are ahead and they're more likely to get the top job. Maybe I need to look outside. Maybe I need to join a smaller company because there I could progress faster as a CEO or some other route, right? So again, it's a preparatory step over here to decide whether you want to stay here or look outside. Where can I show business impact? I will again come back to business impact because that is, I think, a fundamental goal that should be there on anybody's mind is that whatever you do, you need to create business impact and it needs to be visible and the CEO needs to see it, right? How do I prioritize my time? Believe it or not, CEOs, a good amount of their own budgeting, that their time management goes in prioritizing. If you are good at prioritizing your time, your tasks, your work activities, you're more likely to succeed, right? So how do you prioritize your time? How do you build a great high performance team? Because we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about performance, and it's not something that you can just do by yourself, right? Your team will decide in a way your success. If team is successful, you are successful. You need to make sure that you're building a high performance team and there's a succession plan, right? Because if you're looking at elevating yourself within the organization, then somebody else needs to be prepared to take your job, right? So that's the prepare phase. And then finally, there is the execute phase, right? Now, here is where you're looking at the results, right? And it's the flip side of prepare. So here, how am I leveraging my new skills? I've picked up some new skills. Now, how am I putting those skills to use? What new connections have I made? Yes, I've made connections with a board member, or I have, I'm getting close to the present CEO or this chief operating officer, whatever, right? Connections. How's my brand being perceived? Right. So in the earlier phase, you're preparing and you're putting down tasks to strengthen your brand. Now measure it and see that has it evolved? Are you being visible? Have people started noticing the great work that you're doing? Right. Now that brand could also be, it could be internal within the organization. It could also be external. Right, you're speaking out. You're attending conferences, leadership conferences. You're making yourself aware, right, of who you are and what you do. Right, so that's from a brand perspective. What business impact did I create? How much time did I spend with C-level? What new opportunities came my way, and then how did the team elevate the brand, the department brand, right? So now in the execute phase, you're actually, here you're looking at results, right? And I would say that this is an iterative process, okay? It's not a one-time exercise because getting to a CEO is going to take time, right? Unless you're working in an organization where it's a quick path to become CEO, it takes time. And I would say this is a yearly exercise that you do. You recalibrate and go back to the first box, because once you've gone through it, the answers would probably be different, right? And you can always recalibrate and fine tune your approach towards heading to the top. Now, while you're doing all of this, it's important to keep some leadership traits in mind, traits that you need to build, right? So the top 10 leadership traits to build. Number one is constantly engage with employees, business peers, and customers, right? Engagement is super critical. Familiarize yourself with all parts of the business, right? Now, a CEO knows the business really well, inside out, right? And I think I mentioned earlier that if you're a CDO, a CIO, at present, you probably have a good view of your business, right? But get into the details and understand every part of it. Get invited into key strategic and leadership meetings. It's very important to be visible and be seen as a strategic person rather than a very tactical kind of a person, right? So get invited into those leadership meetings. build a high caliber performance driven team, because success of the team will determine your success, and build a succession plan, like I mentioned earlier. Harness technology to the max, clearly articulating business benefits. Now, being in that technical role, you also, apart from implementation, you also need to articulate what value that technology is bringing to the business, right? So if you're able to articulate the impact you're making, then that's a good thing, right? Number 6 is, if possible, get exposure to new business functions every 3 years. I'm a great fan of being rotated, right? So I'm not sitting in one area for too long. Every 3 years, I move, right? I take on new roles, right? Because that will make it easier for me to get the top job if I get exposure to multiple areas of business. And in fact, some of the very successful CIOs in India, I mean, they're not only CIOs, but they're also, they're also handling, they're also, CHROs. In some cases, they are, head of supply chain. So they take on additional roles, right? So that, it's part of their grooming process. Be seen as, excuse me, be seen as risk taking, solving complex problems for the business, right? A CEO is always taking risks, right? So if you get that practice of taking risks and be seen as somebody who's looking at solving complex issues for the business, then that's a plus point for you, right? That's something that will get noticed. That yes, so and so person took this risk and came out of it successfully, and maybe he's the right fit for the next role. Foster a culture of collaboration, teamwork, and communication. Again, 3 important aspects in one line that I mentioned: collaboration, teamwork, the fact that people need to work together to produce results, and effective communication, from top down, right? So it's key. Get a solid grasp on business numbers, attention to detail. CEOs are very this is that one skill that they do really well is attention to detail. They understand the numbers really well. So I would say that get exposure to understanding the business from a numbers perspective. What is driving profitability from a cost angle, not just for your IT department, but for the whole business. Get that that attention to detail and looking at numbers very, very carefully and in minute detail. Be seen as approachable, affable, and assertive, right? So again, these are the top 10 leadership traits that I think are critical as a CIO and CDO to move upwards. Right? All right, let's look at some examples of CIOs and CDOs who've become CEOs, right? Now these are a mixed bag of people who've been in the earlier era, right, when the internet was just coming in, to some of the modern ones. But it's important to, why I'm showing this is that there is a new world out there, right? So it's not like CIOs are always stuck in their roles, CDOs are always doing what they're supposed to be doing, but people do move around, right? So the first one is Greg Carmichael. So currently he's the CEO of Fifth Third Bank, one of the largest banks in the US. At some point in time, he was a CIO in that bank, right? And he became a COO. So he took that lateral shift. Remember the first slide I'd shown a graphic where you have one route is for you to get to a business role, right? So he chose a business role, and over the years became so currently he's the CEO and chairman of the bank. Second example is Starbucks. Stephen Gillette. He at some point in time he was CIO at Starbucks, and he became the COO of some other company. So he went out, right? So that was the second route that I mentioned, and he took on a business role. And finally, at the moment, he's a CEO of a Google company, of an Alphabet company, right? Philip Clark, at one point in time, he was the CIO of Tesco, and he became the CEO. Now, of course, I think he's retired now, but he rose from CIO to CEO within the same organization. It took many years, but he reached there. Don Lepore, this is way back in the internet, was just about starting up and becoming popular, but Charles Schwab and Company, she joined as a CIO in that organization and rose all the way up to vice chairman of another company. But then, from there, she moved on to become a CEO of a venture capitalist company, right? Tim Campus was CIO at Facebook at one point of time. He became the CEO of some other company, so he went out, and now he's the CIO of Apple, right? So you can look him up on LinkedIn. John Boucher was Harrah's Entertainment. He was a CIO in that organization and became CEO of some other casino company, and now he owns a venture capitalist company. Kevin Horner was CIO at one point in time of Alcoa, which is it's a very large industrial organization, and he became CEO of Mastech. Now, of course, he's retired, but and he went out and chose that route. Adam Brotman was the chief digital officer at Starbucks at one point in time, and he became the CEO of J. Crew, which is a retail company, and now I think he's somewhere else. Ashish Chauhan, an Indian example, many of you would know him or heard of him. He was a CIO at Reliance Industries at one point in time, and currently he's the CEO of Bombay Stock Exchange. Right? Satish Pense is another gentleman. He was CIO of HCC, and they decided to spin off. So then he became the CEO of the spin-off company, and now he's the director. Right? Now, all these people, and of course there will be many, many more examples, right? They all have something in common, right? And what is it that they have in common? Well, they've all been involved in transformational business impacting projects. I will keep harping on that business impact thing, right? You need to be part of that. You need to be doing some transformational, business impact related work to get noticed and add that to your credentials. They didn't spend more than 5 years in a CIO CDO role. They kept moving. Another common thing is some moved internally while many went out. So like I'd shown earlier, there's a possibility for you to stay in your company and go that route, or you go out and from there you reach your aspirations. They acquired some advanced degrees along the way. It's always a good thing to have an advanced degree, preferably an MBA or something, some sort of a soft skills certification or something of that sort. They also held board member and advisory positions, right? And you will see that a lot of like I mentioned earlier, a lot of CEOs today also are board members, advisory board members in other organizations, and that helps, right? So to build your credentials, your brand. They built relationships, communicated well, and planned their moves, right? And last but not least, they built high-performance teams and succession plan, because the fact that they're able to move out means somebody else came in their place. If it was within, if they elevated within the organization, then that's critical. So I think that is the end. Yeah, that was my last slide, and yeah, I'm open to. Hope that was useful. I hope I was able to give some useful tips as to what you could do as CIOs and CDOs, or that for that matter, if you're in some other position, what do you need to do today to become a CEO tomorrow? Priyal, questions?
Yeah, sure. So we had this follow-up question by Ram, where in the event of the great resignation or the layoffs, which happens in the tech space, for a CXO of a startup, how would he or she react to this situation in terms of taking advantage of having access to top talent? And what's the best strategy to have in terms of balancing between the investor's interest in the company's resources or a growth?
Yeah, so it's a good thing, right? I mean, if the great resignation is happening and great people are leaving, and if you as a CXO of a smaller of a startup, if you're able to attract that kind of talent, then why not? I mean, the only challenge you will face is is how you're going to compensate them, right? Because if they're high-paying professionals and you're a startup and you may not be in that position to hire and pay that kind of salaries, then yes, then that's a challenge. But look, there is even for startups for right now, if you're not impacted by the business climate today and you're doing relatively well, then you have this great pool of talent, right, which is out there looking for jobs. And trust me, a lot of senior professionals who have been asked to leave or are possibly leaving on their own are also looking at startups, right? Because people have aspirations and people join startups for various reasons. So yeah, so this is it's a great opportunity for the CX of a startup to hire these people if they can. Of course, they'll have to work out different compensation models, whether it is through stock or whether it is salary, or it could be it could even be as a gig worker, because a lot of people are preferring to be gig workers, which means that they work for some time, part time or on contract, and they also do other things. If you're okay with that kind of a model, which a lot of companies are looking into that, then that's good for you. The second part of the question I think you mentioned is balancing between investors and I didn't quite get that part.
So balancing between the investors' interest and companies' resources or growth.
Yeah, so look, the investors are also interested in ensuring that your startup gets good set of people, right, to work with. So and the investor is only interested in making sure that the money that they've invested, it doubles or triples, right, or becomes 10x in X number of years. So they wouldn't really be, they wouldn't be too bogged down with the day-to-day operational, who you're hiring and what kind of people you're getting on board. As long as you're able to show output and, bring, you're able to multiply their money, I think they won't have a problem.
Great. So we have the next question by Ajit Pokarkar, which is more skill related. So if a CIO who's more of a relatively specialist role wants to become a CEO, a more generalist role, especially in a non-tech business like FMCG or manufacturing, so what matters more in terms of the skill set? Is it the deeper or diverse business skills or exceptional people skills and the ability to pick the best people doing specialized roles?
Look, if you are working in an end user organization, so whether it is FMCG or whether it is mining or whether it is manufacturing, whatever, it's an end user, non-technical kind of a business, and you're a CIO and you want to, elevate and get to the CEO role, it's going to be difficult, right? So in this case, you have to, I would say that try to get cross business experience or cross functional experience rather. Because what I've seen is that a CIO becoming a CEO in a FMCG related company is very difficult. It's not easy, and probably there aren't too many cases to talk about. So in that kind of a scenario, you would try to pick up other kinds of roles along with the CIO role, right, which could be CHRO, it could be supply chain, could be something else. So that would be my recommendation. Also, I would say that some quite a number of organizations have rotational kind of programs where they move you every now and then. I know Asian Paints is a great example where people move around, right? So the current CIO may come from a manufacturing background, right? I think he was the head of supply chain and now he's the CIO. So people move around, and that again depends on the culture and the way the top layer thinks, right? So again, not a clear-cut answer, but I think my advice would be to pick up some other role as well along with your CIO role, and slowly migrate to some business kind of a role so that it becomes easier for you to move up if you want to stay in the same company.
Any further questions from the audience side?
Just one question. This is from Arun.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Heminder. Good to connect with you after a long
Same.
time.
Yes.
Yeah. Any kind of observations on the effectiveness of CIO turned CEOs and their tenures, and any learnings from that?
See, tenures, if I take you back to that slide, which is from Spencer Stewart, right? So in India, the tenure is a bit long, right? So what Spencer Stewart says is that the average CIO tenure is about 8.4 years in India, right? Whereas in overseas, Western and developed markets like EMEA, it's about 3.7. So I would say that, the longer you stay in a CIO role, the harder it's going to get for you to come out and do something different, right? So my recommendation would be around 5 years would be a good thing, 5 to 6 years max.
Heminder, I think I have not communicated effectively.
Hmm.
I was saying CIOs transiting to CEOs and their effectiveness in the CEO role and their typical duration.
Oh, okay. I don't have that data with me, unfortunately, Arun. So I won't be able to tell you how effective are those CEOs who have been ex-CIOs, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, the few that I know, I know that they're doing exceedingly well. So, for example, I mean, if you look at Ashish Chauhan, right? So he's currently the CEO of Bombay Stock Exchange. He was a CIO at one point in time. He's doing exceedingly well, and of course, he planned his career really well, right? It all comes down to how you do your planning, and obviously, if you've got the top job, it's probably gone through a lot of vetting and scrutiny, and I'm sure you would do a great job. So I think that's not a problem. I mean, I'm sure they're very effective as CEOs because they've put in that extra work and they've added those extra skills, and they've got the exposure and the connects. If all of this is in place, I don't see any reason why they are not that efficient, why they wouldn't be that efficient.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, I think that's probably it. So thank you very much for attending. I hope it was useful. If there's anything specific that you'd like, you can reach out to 10xTD and myself at Minervian, and we could, do some specific, workshops related to some of the things we talked about. So I'll leave that to you. So thank you once again, and you have a great day ahead.
Thank you all. I request you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, connect with us on LinkedIn to get access to more such enriching and insightful webinars going forward. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care. Okay. Bye. Bye.